So welcome to the Profitable Franchisees podcast. I'm Tracy Leake. I'm your host. This is the podcast where we bring strategies and stories to help you to grow a more profitable franchise business. And today I'm really excited because we've got Jodi Brown here talking with us. And we're talking about a really important topic that I think often gets missed being spoken about. And it's about mental health in the workplace. And I've known Jodi for a while. He specialises at talking about this along with high performance coaching. And so really happy to have Jodi here. So welcome, Jodi. Thanks for joining us and to talk about this.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Tracy. Good to be on here and have a chat.
It's like we're having an official chat rather than just a chat on the side. Can you take a couple of minutes just to talk to us about how you got into the topic of mental health and what your focus is on that when you're coaching and speaking and helping people around mental health? How did you end up in this space?
Yeah, it's a pretty long story. I'll give you the condensed version. My background originally was IT and spent a number of years in the IT space. That moved into the marketing sphere, so digital marketing for about 10 years. And during that period, I had some personal challenges. So I went through a couple of separations and probably 14, 15 years ago now, I was diagnosed with clinical depression and severe anxiety. And I had been living with depression for maybe 8 years before I reached out. I knew I was struggling, but I all the stigma surrounding it. So I didn't want to be, I felt fear of judgment and shame and guilt and all those things. So didn't reach out. And when I finally did, managed to overcome it. And through that process, I was fortunate enough that I was surrounded by really good people. And thanks to them, they kind of got me into exercise and social support and lots of the things that helped me get through that period. I sort of was moving into the coaching and training space over a number of years while still doing other consulting and sales training and whatnot. And just with my clients, especially around the coaching, it just more and more times we would have to deal with some of the mental health stuff before we got into the actual coaching. Well, it was coaching, but it wasn't really business coaching. And so it just, every step along the way, I kept getting sort of steered towards the mental health space. And then I became a facilitator for a charity that specializes in mental health awareness. And so I got trained up, and as the more and more I learned about the topic and the more I kind of researched and saw the need for it, especially in the workplace, it kept steering me that way. And so that's where, full circle around. Now I get to share and impart my stories and my own lived experience with mental health. And so that's kind of been the journey.
It's funny, isn't it, that stigma that's attached to it. But the more and more, the number of times people on the podcast have said, franchisees have said, oh, I went through a period of depression. I've had my own period of that. I was put onto a medication for a tumor I have in my head that actually forced me into a depression. Like, it gave me all the signs and symptoms of it. And I think this is why we need to talk more about it, because especially, the stigma for men in particular, like, I didn't have as much of a challenge to be able to go to my girlfriends and say, oh my goodness, this is happening to me. Do you have this? We're used to talking about hormonal imbalances and stuff like that. But for men, the number of men that I speak to who say, oh yeah, I had that, but 8 years before you were able to speak to someone. I mean, you must be made of tough stuff to actually be able to handle that 8 years on your own before the journey to actually, getting some more assistance with that. What was that 8 years like?
Yeah, it wasn't pleasant. And it's funny because around that time, I actually didn't believe in depression. I thought depression was something that you could think your way out of. And so, I had my own stigma around it. I had my own beliefs and thoughts around it that I just didn't believe it was real. And so I didn't even really accept that whole period while I was depressed. I didn't really accept it. I tried to mask it. So, I started using drugs. I used alcohol to cope. I used, prescription medication because I didn't want to believe that there was anything wrong or that there was something that, that was a thing. And so, it was interesting. It was interesting. I had my own stuff going on.
Yeah, it's amazing. And, thank you so much for sharing honestly, because I believe that the more that we share honestly, the more it allows other people to share and to be able to find solutions for it. I actually read on your website, and I was amazed. It was when I went to your website just to get your phone number, actually, but I was reading some things, and it said that, I might get this wrong, so correct me if I'm wrong, but 50% of Australians will suffer from some type of mental illness in their life, and that's at a cost of $10 billion annually to the workplace. That's a pretty big statistic, isn't it?
Yeah, it's probably even more. I think it's more upwards of like 30 to 40 billion that they're estimating now. 10 billion is just around depression. But yeah, 50% of Australians will experience a mental health disorder in their lifetime. Many more will struggle for periods. They don't meet the criteria of a mental illness, but they still struggle for periods. And, I'm not sure if you know, but well, even out of that 50%, over half of those people will never reach out and seek support. And so that's another massive problem. And that leads, at the moment in this country, there are 9 people that take their life every day. It's the leading cause of death for young Australians, 18 to 24, is suicide.
Come on. Oh, that's just heartbreaking to hear, for something that, not to say it's simple, but simply reaching out or to make it commonplace that you can actually speak up and say, hey, I'm struggling. And as you said, sometimes it's for short periods, I know, like when my mum passed away, I went through a bout of grief, and that felt very much like depression. It's not like you've got this and it's forever. Sometimes it's just periods of time. So, I talk about, with franchisees, the podcast is called Profitable Franchisees. And when we say that, just so everyone knows, profitable doesn't necessarily just mean money in the bank. Profitable also means happiness and fulfillment, and to actually feel like you're moving forward. But if we just take the cost of mental health, $10 to $40 billion a year, you take a little piece of that for every business owner. There's 2 million small business owners in Australia. So every business owner has got a part of that cost pie. What's some simple strategies that a business owner could put into their own workplace to help with this? Even a very selfish reason, even just to cut down their costs, but also to help their team, their customers, themselves in this mental health space.
Yeah, absolutely. Look, the Black Dog Institute, who they're one of the most well-researched organisations around mental health in Australia, they released a white paper maybe 2022, and they specifically focused on researching mental health in the workplace. And the number one recommendation they made was to train and educate your managers and leaders on how to handle mental health in the workplace, how to understand or to identify when somebody might be struggling, and then also how to empower their leaders, because ultimately we're all responsible for our own mental health. The workplace has a responsibility to identify and manage the hazards and the psychosocial hazards, but ultimately it is up to the individual. So empowering them with some of them. Look, often it's simple tools as well. The top 3 things you can do to improve your mental health, the number one thing is exercise. Clinical studies have shown, recent studies, that 3 times a week, 20 minutes of aerobic exercise, so, get the heart pumping and a bit of sweat going, is having better impacts than antidepressant medication. And so, depression is one of those things that there are actionable steps you can take to help move yourself back towards feeling positive, exercise being number one. And it's different for everybody. I'm an ultra runner, so I love running marathons and long distances and, crazy stuff like that. But others, just going for a walk out the door for 10 minutes, turn around and come back is equally impactful. So the number one thing is exercise. The number 2 thing you can do is mindfulness practice. And again, it's another, like, all of these are simple. They're not easy to build into habits. Takes discipline. But mindfulness can be as simple as breathing techniques. So, box breathing, which is just 4x4 breathing. You're breathing in, you're holding, you're breathing out, you're holding, going around in circles a few times. That can really help in the moment, as well as over long term, have a really positive impact. And helping people understand that, what is it for them? Like, mindfulness practice can be colored by numbers. It can be reading a book. It can be, listening to some music, anything that gets you focused on the present moment without judging it, And then the third thing is social support. So having a good connection of trusted friends that you can talk to, that will listen non-judgmentally. So they're the top three simple steps: exercise, mindfulness, social support. And then off the back of that, you've got things like sleep strategies. Understanding that we need, most of us, 6 to 8 hours, depending on the person. And a lot of them, once I say them, people go, "Oh, well, that's pretty common sense." But it's not always that common, especially when we're stuck in the middle. If we're in business and it's busy, we're stressed out, there's all these things going on. Sometimes we forget that some of those simple things can have a huge impact on our mental health.
Yeah, it's I remember, I love that you talk about that stat of, exercise compared to, taking an antidepressant, because I remember when that happened, for me personally, it was the medication I was taking, and depression was a side effect of that. So when I started to notice it was my mum who said, "Call your specialist and just find out what's happening with your medication." And he said, "Oh yeah, that's a side effect of the medication. Here, let me just write you an antidepressant." I went, "Hold on a second. I don't want to be ending up taking 12 medications because I take one." And so I booked myself into a psychologist, and she said the walking thing, and I said, "Well, I struggled to just get started. That was my biggest issue at the time." And she said she taught me how to do all these triggers, like, lay out all of your gear the night before, and your trick is to just get up and get dressed. And then your next one is just walk to the mailbox. And then when you get to the mailbox, say, "Oh, well, I'm out now. Can I walk to the end of the street?" And so it was a simple strategy. And I think you're right. Common sense. My mum used to always say it should be called uncommon sense because it seems less people have it than those that do. But thinking about that, have you worked with businesses that have incorporated that into their business routine? Like I know some of my clients, they have, health clubs with their team. They'll have a Friday morning walk or something like that. What are some innovative things you've seen business owners do to help their team to, put themselves in the best possible light?
Yeah, so it's interesting. Last year, the new psychosocial hazard code of practice came into play. So it's legislation under workplace health and safety. So there's now a framework of what business owners need to do, required by law. And under that framework, it helps businesses identify those different things. And some of them are things like flexibility. So, a business that can recognize that maybe it's a monotonous task. So maybe they're on a factory line and they're just doing the same thing over and over and over. That's quite a monotonous task. So giving them some sort of flexibility around their working conditions. So maybe they have an extra day or two where it's not the same task. So they're sort of mixing it up to avoid that monotony. Implementing wellbeing programs. So I work with an organization that they basically will come in and set up a series of workshops for a business. So once a month, they get their team together, they have a bit of fun, they usually put on a bit of a lunch, things like that. And they're teaching them things like, stress reduction techniques, personal training. So they'll come up with nutrition plans and exercise plans to really having more of an inclusive workplace. And then also collaboration and the clarity. So, a business that shares what they're doing. So things like when they're creating new policies around this type of thing is getting the engagement of the team as well. Because ultimately that's, if you want employee satisfaction, get your employees or your team members involved in the process. Like what do you want to see? What can we do as a business to help improve? And the ones I see doing the best are the ones that are asking their team, "Hey, what should we do?" And, whether it's get a speaker in, whether it's go and do a high ropes course, whether it's, might just be more social. Let's plan social activities once a month. And so it's really looking at and promoting a work-life balance. And especially in those higher stressed environments, they know that, you do need to de-stress. There's no two ways about it. And it's really promoting that. So it's the ones that have the mental health, like they're championing mental health in the workplace and bringing it and making it more open to talk about. And when people realize, I'll run trainings and you'll get somebody that'll share, and then I'll say, "Okay, does anybody else experience that?" And everybody's nodding their head. We're all thinking we're the only ones that have got this thing going on. But the reality is we all have ups and downs. It's called being human. It doesn't mean you have depression, but you can certainly have bouts of feeling depressed. Same with anxiety. You can have bouts of being anxious. And so it's really identifying, okay, let's put some strategies in place where we know we're going to get towards burnout. Okay, cool. Let's have a chill out space. Let's go and do a lunch, things like that. So it's embracing it.
And the thing is to remember that if you're all listening, as a business owner, you have a different level of stresses put onto you, responsibilities with team. But even if someone's listening right now and they're a sole trader, a franchisee, there's lots of franchisees out there that are sole traders. They're working for themselves within it. You've got to remember you're part of your team as well. It's not just about your employees. It's what are you doing and who are you reaching out to? And a lot of franchisors I've met, they get really worried about franchisees saying, oh, I think this franchisee is in trouble. What can we do? So if you notice that someone, they haven't come forward and said that they're suffering a problem, but you can tell, and you can usually tell when someone's a bit off or, their concentration's not there or they just don't seem themselves. How do you approach that in a way that's respectful?
Yeah, great question. And there's lots of resources out there. I direct people to the Are You OK website for further training, because they've actually got awesome guides on how to use effective language and how to have those conversations. But ultimately, like you said, you'll know your co-workers, you'll know people that are close to you when they are, or you feel like they're struggling. If you feel like they're struggling, they probably are. So it's really about identifying that change in behavior or character. Once you've identified that, the next step is just to approach them and, applying things like non-judgment and a bit of empathy. And so the whole thing, Australian culture, we kind of say hello by saying, how's it going? And then the answer is usually, yeah, I'm good, or I'm okay. And when you do that and you approach, say you approach a colleague where you know they're struggling and you say to them, hey, how's it going? And their reply often will be, yeah, I'm okay. An easy way is just to repeat the same question in a different way. And it's to say something like, hey, what's really going on? And often that's enough for someone to pause, reflect and go, oh, yeah, you know what? It's actually been a really tough couple of weeks and I've got this going on. I've got some stresses at home and I'm frustrated with, my accountant's been not getting back to me. And then they'll start opening up. If they don't, if you ask that and they go, no, I'm okay. The next thing to do, and you don't want to go any further than this initially, is really just to highlight in a caring way what you've noticed. And it might be something like, oh, hey, look, I know you say you're okay, but over the last 3 weeks, I've noticed that, when we go together and catch up with the team, you seem a bit flat. You're normally the one that's asking questions and putting your hand up, but I've noticed recently you're not doing that. I've seen a couple of anger outbursts. I'm just concerned. How about we go and have a chat? And again, they'll often be enough to go, oh, yeah, let's have a chat. If they don't want to talk at that point, all you need to do then is just check back in. So keep them on your radar and circle back around in a few days and just keep checking in on them. You don't want to put the pressure on somebody to, make them feel like they have to open up. But it's really just approaching with care, compassion, and empathy. We don't know what anyone's been through. And so sometimes sometimes people are fearful of asking. They can see there's something going on and they're worried, well, what if they say something and I don't know how to handle it? The thing is, you don't need to have the answers. A good response might be, oh, wow, that sounds really tough. I can't imagine what that would be like. I actually don't know what to do, but how about we figure it out together? And then it's go and get some support, go and jump online, research, Black Dog Institute or Beyond Blue, and take those steps together. But it's really about approaching it with compassion and non-judgment.
That's such great advice. And I think, I have the same experience as you do as a coach, where people will actually open up pretty easily because we're used to talking to people about sensitive topics and drawing information out of people. And I think, as a business owner, and this is not just your team, this is maybe your family, your friends, everybody. This is not topic. I mean, I know we're talking workplace, but it's a topic for everyone. It's when you have that relationship built with people, it's easy to ask that question. I actually had a franchisee that I saw at a conference and I just went up to them at lunchtime. I said, hey, are you okay? And they said, what? And I said, oh, you just exactly that. You're not as bubbly or asking as many questions or anything else. Are you okay? And then they said to me, oh, no, I just had a client ring me this morning and I had to come into conference and I just can't stop thinking about this issue. But then they turned around and said to me, they said, but thank you so much for asking. And I think sometimes we're afraid to ask when in actual fact it shows, you care enough to ask.
That's right. And often just the action of asking can really change somebody's day. And, and then not having to have the answers makes it a bit easier because you don't even have to say anything. Because often people, and women are better at this than men for sure, is being able just to dump it all out. And then you just sit there nodding and, yeah, oh, that's no good. And, that's all often is needed. Because I'm sure, like, we've all had those conversations with somebody. You walk away going, oh, that was so good. And they didn't say anything. They're just sitting there nodding and, oh, that's no good. But that's all we need. We just need to express and get it all out to often make us feel better.
Yeah, my best friend's a coach. She's actually has a psychology background, double degree in psychology and stuff. But she's like, best coaches are actually the ones who just ask a good question and then listen. And
yeah, absolutely.
It's a good point. On your website, you talked about some happiness hacks. Could you give us some ideas on how to help us all increase our happiness factor?
Yeah, so we chatted about a few of them. One of the easiest ways to change your perspective in the moment. So again, often we have our blinkers on and it's like this and head down and we can't get out of it. One of the ways to just lessen that a little bit is to be grateful. One of the first things that I'll often get a client or someone to do if I'm sharing these happiness hacks is start a gratitude journal. And it doesn't have to be it can be written if that's what you're into, but it can just be on your phone. Every day, just come up with 3 things that you're grateful for. Gratitude causes happiness. And I know in the morning, like when I wake up, often because we're hardwired to be negative as humans, and we needed it, when we were living in caves, if we stepped to the edge of our cave and there was a mango tree over there, if we just were wired positive, we just walk out and grab mango, not looking for tigers or bears or whatever. And so we are kind of slanted to the negative. And so we do have to do things to flip that around. So when I first wake up in the morning, often there's some negative thoughts that might come in. And to turn that around, I just start thinking about the things I'm grateful for. We live in an awesome country. We've got, great education system. We've got a healthcare system that's great. It's got challenges, but it's great. We don't live under oppression. We're not in war. I'm grateful for my children. They're healthy and happy. When you hit about 5 things of being grateful, you kind of you're smiling by the end of it. And especially if you really like pause and like really think about it. So gratitude is certainly one. Things like meditation. I last year had some challenges. I'd sold a business and I had it didn't end very well. I had some personal challenges going on and I developed insomnia. And I probably had it for maybe 6 months where I couldn't get to sleep, or I'd wake up in the middle of the night and couldn't get back to sleep. And I was listening to a podcast, a gentleman in America, Bill Ackman. He's what does he call himself? An activist investor. And he was sharing how he went through a divorce. And he's a billionaire, went through a divorce and having all these challenges. And somebody recommended that he do meditation. And specifically, the one he was recommended was transcendental meditation. And I thought, I'll give it a go. I've got insomnia. And within 7 days, insomnia was gone. And I've stuck. It's one of the only things I've stuck to for this long. I think I'm on day, if I have a look, 261 days in a row now of meditating. And so I recommend that. I put my mum onto it. She loved it. Because again, it's giving you that chance of just spending some time with yourself. And if you do an active meditation, you're not thinking too much about other stuff and you're learning how to apply like non-judgment to your thoughts and whatnot. So meditation is another great hack. And meditation doesn't have to be sitting on a cliff, cross-legged, fingers on. It can it can just be walking meditation. And there's thousands and thousands of guided meditations out there as well. So they're probably a couple ones. And then again, things like exercise, and whatever that looks like to you. You've got to think about what works for you. So I might recommend to you, hey, go try transcendental meditation. And you try and it didn't really do it. That's totally cool. What about a different guided meditation? What about this form of mindfulness? So it's about finding out what works for you and then doing that.
Yeah, and I always say it's like going to the smorgasbord. Everybody's going to attack a smorgasbord differently. Some people are going to take a whole big plate, others going to take a little bit over time. Some start with seafood, some start with dessert. And it's just asking, and the trick is to keep going back to the smorgasbord until you find the thing that you like. I love the gratitude stuff. I have a lot of clients who will do gratitude with their kids around the dinner table, teaching their kids.
Yeah, we do that.
Start doing that. Yeah, see, and I think there's something to that when you add kids into it, hearing how honest they are about what they're grateful for. I learned to be grateful. I make a real purpose of being grateful about things when they go wrong. You know, like people would say, oh, you've got a brain tumor. That must be horrible. And people are always surprised when I say, you know, one of the things I'm most grateful for is that I got a brain tumor. You know, totally changed the course of my life. I learned so much from it. Sometimes just not enough time has passed. Like at the moment, in the time when I got it, I was not grateful.
No, of course.
But now looking back with that hindsight of what you can do, I'm having trouble asking questions because I'm listening to you and I'm so on it that I've like forgotten I'm supposed to be interviewing you about things, and it's like, oh my goodness, some of these tips are so good. What about, you know, just doing things of, you know, I have a lot of business owners who get caught up in business and they go, I've forgotten, you know, what I'm passionate about. How important is it to get out and do things like, you know, you say craziness is what I think when you say you do ultra running and stuff. Like, whoop. But how important is it to find those things outside of your business? You're a business owner. You've been a business owner for many, many years as well. How important is it to find those things that are not attached to your business to do to help you with your own mental health?
Yeah, massively. Look, I think one of the things that they should be teaching at schools, which they, you know, they're starting to bring in a little bit, is understanding what your values are. You know, it really starts with that. Understand what your values are. And then from there, you can then start to identify like what gives you meaning and what gives you purpose. And so whilst it might be, depending on what stage of business you're at, some of us have a little bit of time, some of us have a lot of time. But it's identifying what makes you feel good. And the best way to try that out is to, like you said, life is kind of like a smorgasbord as well. And so once you identify what is that important to you from a values point of view, start to find those values in the things that you do. So, you know, if you've got a value of loyalty, okay, we'll start to go join maybe a women's circle or a men's group or, you know, things like that where you can go and be part of something. It really comes down to, identifying what makes you feel good and then trying different things, you know, maybe a bit of yoga, see if that's good, or maybe learning to sew, you know, learning how to paint. But understanding your values to then find out what gives you meaning. And you can still find meaning inside of work as well. It's, you know, it's how you were kind of saying earlier as well. You can, in the moment, things cannot be pleasant. But everything that happens to you, you know, I say it happens for a reason because it's happened. And then it's up to you to decide, you know, there's not much we can control. We can control the awareness of ourselves and then the actions that we take. So you could have decided I've got a brain tumor and that's it. You could just always look at the negative and, how bummed am I, play the victim. But if you look at it as an opportunity to grow, what's the lesson here? Like, where can I learn from this? And then take actions, which you've obviously done. And clearly for you was a huge lesson. But other people can look back and always be having that negative thought to it. It really comes down to understanding yourself better. And, you know, being a coach, the more you work on yourself, the more that it impacts everything else outside of you as well. Because you can't be anywhere else but inside your head. So,
yeah. And I think, you know, a strategy I use with a lot of franchisees, because in franchising, peer-to-peer support is one of the biggest things you can do. When I have franchisees who are, you know, going through one of those moments where business feels like tough and they're not loving it and what they're doing, I often say to them, how about you just give the brand newest franchisee a call and just say, hey, I'm just calling you. I see you're brand new. What could I do to help you? Let's have a chat for 10, 15 minutes and talk about your business and what's happening. And then they come back later and then say, oh my goodness, that was so good. I think sometimes taking the eyes off yourself and actually helping someone else can, you know, change that feeling inside of you.
Oh, massive. Yeah. I do some work in schools. I've just come from a school, Miami High, and we finished an 8-week mentoring and wellbeing program. And yeah, it's a lot of the things, you know. I love seeing the kids evolve over that period of time, and then understanding, we teach them about values and role models, and being able to then consider their thoughts and move through that. So it's understanding themselves better to then, yeah. And then we find at the end, like today, I asked the mentors, like, what's the highlight? And they always, and these are volunteers, so there's mentors from the community that come in. They always seem to get more out of it than the students. And it's because giving back and adding value to others when you're not expecting anything in return, you're not getting paid for it, it's a really good feeling. I see them bouncing out of there after every session. It's one of the things I recommend people do is volunteer somewhere, because that, you're right, giving back to others, it's really hard to feel really low and negative when you're out there helping somebody else.
And even, when you say, volunteering, helping someone else, I mean, I know a lot of business owners have that catch cry of, I'm busy, I have no time. It's amazing how just a little thing can make a difference. I'm going to share a story with you because we're just chatting, is when my brother turned 42, I said to him, what do you want for your birthday? And he said, oh, no, do a random act of kindness. I've never told this story publicly before. And I was talking to a client of mine. She goes, I saw someone do this on Pinterest. They were turning 40 or something, so they did 40 acts of random kindness. So for my brother's birthday, I did 42 acts of random kindness, and I put it into a PowerPoint and gave him the PowerPoint. And there were simple things like one day I saw a lady leaving the supermarket. She had 4 kids running around her, and I just went up to her and said, can I help you? Like, could I push your trolley to the car for you while you wrangle your kids? And in the time it took from getting from the supermarket to her car, she told me her husband was a fly-in, fly-out worker. The first day he flew out, after being home for a while, the kids were always ratty. And she said, yesterday we're having such a great day. I didn't want to go grocery shopping and interrupt it, but I try and do that before they go because wrangling 4 kids at the supermarket. Yeah. And it was amazing how much that helped her. But when I left, even though I did it for a present for my brother, I can still, inside of me, where even when I tell you this story, I can still feel inside of me the day when I was helping her put her groceries in the car going, that cost me nothing. I was already there and it took 5 minutes out of my day. But how much that impacted me to just see someone else and go, her kids, someone else could have looked at her and her kids and gone, oh my God, she's got ratty kids and not well behaved. No, they were going through that their dad had just left and they knew they wouldn't see him again for a couple of weeks. It doesn't take a lot of time. And as you said, those people volunteering, I mean, how much, am I actually giving or am I actually getting a whole lot from that?
Absolutely. I try to do it with everybody, like at the shops, if it's the barista at the cafe, I'm always trying to be curious. And because some of the best conversations, like you said, with that woman, there's gold everywhere to be mined. And and they love it too, because often like the interaction in a shop or a workplace or a cafe or anything like that is very transactional. Yep, I'll have my flat white on soy with a half, and then it's like, yep, thanks, cool. What's your name? We'll call it out. But if you say to them, oh, hey, how's your day going? They're like, what? Like, and then they feel good. And then there's some of the things that people will just share on the spot. And it feels good. Like I enjoy it. It's way better than just going through transactional with people. I like to have rich conversations as often as I can.
I mean, I had to ring ASIC the other week and the lady on the phone, and I said to her, and we had an issue. Anyway, they had mucked up something in my file, so I was trying to fix it and stuff. And she said to me, oh, hi, how are you? And I said, I'm great. How are you doing? Because I'm really well, thank you. Thank you for asking. And I said, hold on a second. What? Doesn't everybody say that to you? Because you're the first person who's asked me how I am, and it was Thursday afternoon. Yeah. I said, well, let me be your one person of the week who's going to be extremely grateful and happy that you're going to help me through this. And she just totally changed it. I've just looked at the clock and realised that we should be ending up now. If you've been listening to Jodi and going, I'm going to give you a plug here, Jodi, so get ready for it.
Thanks.
I think that this is such a huge topic with some simple solutions. If you're a franchisee listening to this and you loved what Jodi's had to say, I can personally endorse Jodi. Come and speak at your conference or event or come in and do workshops. There's a whole compliance arm around mental health now that Jodi's the only person in Australia that can actually help you with that compliance. I'll put all of his details in the show notes, but it's Alchemy Coaching. Is his website, it's .com.au, isn't it? Yep. So reach out to Jodi. If you can't get a hold of Jodi, reach out to me and I will pass his details to you. But I think that this is a topic. I go to so many conferences in a year. It's not a topic often talked about, but so important when you're in business and in those pressures. So if you've loved listening to Jodi like me, I always know the sign of a good podcast when I get to the end of it and go, oh my goodness, I should have been taking notes. That, you know, reach out and definitely can endorse that it would be a great session to have. Or if you personally want him to come in and help you, you'll come in and work with someone's team personally, would you not?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Do that. So he's not afraid to come in and do the smaller group as well as the big group.
No.
But Jodi, I appreciate you sharing, you know, from personally as well as through to, you know, tips and strategies. That's what I loved the most, was that there were some really simple strategies that anyone could implement, won't cost you a cent, but will absolutely turn your life and your team's lives around. And let's start making it no longer a stigma to talk about mental health.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for the opportunity, Tracy. I really appreciated being on your podcast.
My pleasure. So as a reminder to everyone, if you want to jump onto the newsletter that is connected to the podcast, the Franchisee Profit Pulse, just head over to my website at tracyleak.com. And we look forward to talking to you on the next podcast. Thanks again, Jodi.
Thank you.